so I took the job and we moved north. So from 2003 on, I've been in Seattle. I continue to do work for BMW, continue to work with Chronicle, and I've added some other clients here. There's other ones along the way, but most of these are more architecture-oriented clients. A few projects that I wanted to show you that I've worked on. One of them is for Open Satellite Mira Koizumi. This was an exhibition called The Corner of Sweet and Bitter. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Open Satellite, but it is an art exhibition hall in Bellevue. It's in the bottom of one of those tall high-rises where the bottom is the gallery and the top is all residential. And what they do is they have these quarterly exhibitions where they bring in an artist from somewhere. He happened to come from Japan, but they come from all over the country, all over the world, and they do a site-specific installation. So Koizumi was very interested in the plight of the Japanese-American migrant worker, particularly during World War II. And as it happens, the land that this, I won't say skyscraper, but the building is on, actually used to be farming land. And so he put in 1,000 strawberry plants and then created this sort of shack that has all these videos in it that talk about, the migrant worker. And so you'll notice the sort of structure and where the pillars are in the space. And I had to do the poster and the exhibition catalog. And I remember I was out for a walk with my dogs. This is where I advocate owning dogs because every day when I take them for a walk, that's my brainstorming time. But I was thinking, how am I going to do this poster? And I thought, well, I'll make the poster a top-down view, be inspired by that of the actual exhibition. And so the cropping of the image is in reference to the way the strawberry field is built. And then these circles kind of mimic the two columns in the space, and then they reference the Japanese flag. And then the way the type, the large title type, the way I included that was to sort of reference these 2x4s that are coming off the structure in the corner. So that's the front of the poster. And the back of the poster just has more information about the exhibition itself and then upcoming information. Also had to do the catalog that accompanied the exhibition, and this was printed on demand. I don't know how, there's lots of things being printed on demand, but Publication Studio out of Oregon, they do a lot of this type of work, and they have a standard practice of all covers for their publications are done with old manila folders, and so you could choose blue or yellow, and so we picked blue. Not showing that as a great design, but more that is the way that the catalog looks on the cover. So again, kind of following with the interior of this had several essays about Koizumi and then some other imagery from other video installations that he's done. But again, following that language of these bars for information. The spacing between those bars of type, I used that same space. I'm getting really tight and anal here, but the spacing in there is what I used here. So all those little details that sort of seem very inconsequential, like I really get caught up in those. This is two separate video installations, so I used color fields to kind of separate them. And then there's essays and sketches throughout. And, when an essay has a break in the text somehow, I use this sort of thin bar again to reference the 2x4s rather than, you could put anything there, you could have a gap, but that's where I sort of feel like those extra little details really help the design. Underground Together, The Life and Art of Harvey Dinnerstein. This is a monograph that I worked on for Chronicle Books. Harvey Dinnerstein is a humanist painter. He's been painting for more than 60 years. He's 80-something. He's been living in Brooklyn all his life. And they wanted to do a retrospective. He's represented by the Frey Norris Gallery out of San Francisco. And so his paintings are all about, people in real situations, real life. Really rich. And if you can imagine, 60 years worth of work in one book. So this was the kind of project where I felt like you really need to have the paintings come forward and speak for themselves rather than impose some sort of design structure on top of the work. And so they were very clear about we want Harvey Dinnerstein to, his work to be relevant now. So it had to look contemporary, the book. That was sort of the only directive that I got from them. So I show a couple of examples of process, mainly because when I present something to any kind of client, I try and give as many variations as I can. So these are 3 distinctly different variations, mainly through just organization and form. So this is where I used all serif type, and then the border, the margins are different, 2 columns worth of text. And then the captions, it's a little difficult to see, but these are the captions, would sit in one place on a page, and then each image would be numbered. This was another variation where I was starting to combine typefaces, a serif and a sans serif, and then one wide column of text and a larger gutter space, and then having the images kind of insert themselves into the text, and then this is a large sort of text excerpt, pull quote, if you will. And then the third version was where, again, combining typefaces here, but the introductory text or the beginning paragraph would be large. There'd be these large color fields back behind some of the artwork, and then the captions would sit in a specific place on the page. And this is the final book, and it became a real combination of all of those designs. And I know I've tried to tell my students, like, do as many variations as you can. Usually I get very attached to one, and then I feel like, well, I gotta make another one, I may as well just whip something out, but I end up liking the next one better. So this one ended up using large text. At the beginning of every essay, there were 3 essays. One was an introduction and the other 2. And then the interior pages had smaller text and 2 columns running throughout for the essays. And this becomes just a pacing issue in terms of how do you deal with an awful lot of imagery and an awful lot of text. And I always call her Crystal Gale through the I couldn't believe how long her hair was. But you know, with a book like this, you just got to deal with pacing and making sure that the imagery that's referenced comes in the right spot in relation to the text. This is an example of a detail of one of the end pages, which is his biography. And one of the things that I really love, and Karen and I have conversations about this, is I'm always looking for ways to combine different typefaces. A lot of it is just by gut instinct and how it feels, but you know, rather we've all got our tried and true typefaces that we like to work with. But this is actually a combination of Scala and Franklin Gothic, and then this little bit up here was used for captions too, is Fairplex. And I've been having conversations with the editor, and we were just discussing, like, how do you make it just look that much, a little bit more contemporary? It's amazing, like, I'm not saying that one typeface will do it, but the addition of something that's a little more contemporary than just Garamond would help make this book feel a little more contemporary. Maryhill Double, this was an exhibition catalog that I did. This is an artist architecture duo out of Seattle, Washington called Lead Pencil Studio. Maryhill Double, that's the installation itself, sits right on the Oregon side of the Columbia River Gorge, and it's this skeletal spatial enclosure. It's pretty close to the edge, as you can see. Here's an up-close view of this. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. You have to take some steps to get out there. But it is the exact volume replica of the Maryhill Museum, which sits across the river on the Washington side. I don't know, has anybody ever been to the Maryhill Museum? Okay, 1, that's 2, that's impressive. It's supposedly the most isolated museum in the world. But basically, it's a 6,000, the original museum itself was 6,000 square feet, and it was made by a man named Samuel Hill. I guess he came out here and saw this land and thought, I'm going to build a Quaker community here and everyone will come. And so he built this building and not even his wife came. So it's pretty isolated. And you know, you can see the Maryhill Double sits right across from it, and they actually applied for permits to have it sit on the same property as the Maryhill Museum, but they refused and refused. And I actually think it's better this way, that they're separated by this huge river. To give you a sense of scale, you could move in and around the piece, so you were not only outside but in it, and that was one of the key factors in terms of the design itself. Here's the design for the catalog. So one of the things, the exact proportions and placement of everything in this book was really considered to sort of reflect the structure itself. So you've got this block of text, you know, its proximity to the edge of the page was in relationship to the edge of the gorge itself, how close it was. And then this large gap in here is kind of a reference to the river. And then just the placement of the text around how much white space there was really more of just this great open space around it. And then the piece, I decided to do it all with gatefolds, just this idea that you could interact with it and you know, look inside and outside. Here's a detail shot. And I didn't choose to have any kind of indents for the type, so just the end line would indicate the next paragraph. And I worked super hard to sort of get the perfect, or what I would consider as close to perfect as I could get with the line spacing, so there weren't any bad gaps. But you could open up each of the pages, and even the inside, when they were smaller, images kind of mimicked that overall text block form. Some images wrapped from page to page. They had, in the essay they talk about, they had a really horrible problem with fire ants and flying stinging ants. So that's big over here. They also had really huge lightning storms that were the problems they were working. So, you know, it was an interesting installation, but also the form of the book, I feel like, really spoke to what they were trying to do with the structure. More details, again, up close. So I was running into a problem with this one where I was flowing the text, but it wasn't going to fit nicely and neatly into that bottom block like some of the other pages have. So I ended up inserting an image over there on the left, and then to indicate the end of an article, I put, you probably can barely see it, but there's a little tiny rectangular blue box. And again, it's those little tiny things that I like to put in that sort of become those extra details that make a design sing, in my opinion. Arcade Magazine.